I just need some time now to get things clear now, to get rid of my doubts, to get rid of my fears. I just need some time now to get things done now, the things I love, things I want. I do what's best for me, what's best for you. But if you fall, who's next to you? I do what's best for me and best for you. I know it hurts 'cause I'm hurt too. I need another you. I just need some time now, need to figure out now if there's still a way for love. I just need some time now, need to think about now if it's worth the pain, if it's worth to wait. I do what's best for me, what's best for you. But if you fall, who's next to you? I do what's best for me and best for you. I know it hurts 'cause I'm hurt too. I need another you. Best for you. But if you fall, who's next to you? I do what's best for me and best for you. I know it hurts 'cause I'm hurt too. I need another you.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday, May 10th. Yay. May. We're already in May. Gosh, it's feeling warm out there. It's summer-like conditions for us already. We're hitting like 79, maybe 80 degrees today for first time this year. Hopefully, we're going to be seeing a lot of that here coming up in the next few months. Hopefully not too many 90s or anything like that around here in Central Oregon. 80s is about right. Happy Coffee with Steve Day. It's Friday, you guys. You guys get to ask me all the questions that you want today. This is a live Q&A day that I do every Friday here on the channel. And it does require some participation on your part. It does require that you guys actually utilize that thing over there called the chat. I need you guys to send me your questions, send me your requests. Let's have a discussion. Let's actually talk about some things. It also means you got to be watching. Because, if you're watching these videos a little bit afterwards, well, unfortunately, that means you're not able to ask questions, right? You can obviously drop them in the comments section below, but we won't really be able to get to your question until probably a week later. Anyway, so today I've got two people watching my stream right now. That's sad. I used to have, when I was doing this on Programming Made Easy, I'd get 20. So I'm still I'm debating on this move. I think it's the right thing, at least for that channel, for Programming Made Easy. But man, it's been hard to bring people over here. It's been really difficult to get you guys to make the change and make the switch over here. And I knew it would be. I knew it would be kind of difficult. You got to get people's attention. And, when I've got 55,000 subscribers on the one channel and they all receive a notification that I'm about to go live, it tends to get more people, right? But those of you who came over here, I was hoping, because you're active participants, you might be those 20 people that do occasionally watch. I hoped that most of you guys would be coming over here to the live stream. Now, that being said, we're growing, right? There was a big explosion of people to start out the channel. As soon as I announced it, it was 60 people came over. And, but that was great. A lot of people came over. Then it obviously died down. The content, I think, is still a little bit different than what people were expecting. A lot of them were expecting it would be programming stuff. And, coming over here, they might subscribe initially, and then they find out, oh, he's going to talk about, he's going to talk a little bit of politics in here, and he's going to talk about Facebook. And so Marcus says, hi, Steve, greetings from Germany. Well, hello, Marcus. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. You are one of 3 viewers right now. I hope we get more, but just fire off your questions at me. If you got anything you want to talk about, you got anything you want to discuss, I would be more than happy to have you guys give me a shout out. I always have a couple things in my back pocket just in case this happens where I don't have enough people to really converse with. So I got a couple of news articles and stuff that I came up with. First one is just really, really neat. And I don't know that anybody, we're down to 2 watchers now. Oh, I lost you. I lost Marcus. Did I lose you, Marcus? My mom and my wife are watching. Anyway, so there's a couple of cool things that I do try to find to talk about in case people don't show up for this and people don't want to ask questions. But the first one, so let me switch over to my screen. A developer created a 2-way chat using only CSS and HTML. That is really creative and possibly could be exploited. I'm just saying, could be exploited. Marcus is still here. Yay, Marcus. Thank you. You're one of, how many people do we have now? Let's see. Ooh, we got 3 watchers again. Yes, 3 people. Again, I remember when it was 20 people over on Programming Made Easy. I'm interested to hear your guys' suggestion. How can we garner more people over here? And it's not just a matter of programming made easy. Keep posting the announcements. I've been trying to put comments and in the description, hey, come check out this channel, because that's where I'm at now. So I'm trying to do everything I can. I don't know. Maybe it's just people don't like this particular format. Which is really crazy, because when I initially posted, hey, what are your thoughts on Coffee with Steve? Overwhelming support. Matter of fact, I can show you guys. Let's see, where was it? YouTube. Go to the YouTubers. Got to go to my channel. Community. All right, let's post this up. Okay, so here's my initial question. Oh, how are you enjoying the Coffee with Steve broadcasts? 37% people said they strongly like. And then 9% said they strongly didn't like and don't like. So by and large, I mean, a lot of people liked it. That's just 2 weeks ago when I had it up there. And when I initially announced it, it was a great idea, right? 59%, which is a little different, right? 59% thought it was a great idea, and then only 37 people strongly like. So I'm wondering if it's just the content, like they like the idea, but then they discovered, oh, well, Steve's unlikable. And maybe it is. I mean, I talk about like politics on here, and then a lot of people don't like that. So some people do. Like my most popular video on here is the one I did about Sargon, and that garnered the most views because I think that there is a political bent to a lot of people. I think people are interested and curious and care about politics. They just don't want to talk about it. I think that's what it really is, and because there's a lot of fear. I'm afraid sometimes when I come on here and I'm about to talk about any sort of counter position. Let me move off this screen because you guys can't really. I'll go back to this in a second. This is important to me. People are afraid to talk about politics. They're afraid because they're going to ruin their relationships. They're going to ruin their friendships. They might lose their job, especially if you're more on the conservative side of things, right? There's this. I don't know of anybody. Well, no, there have been a very small, select few cases where somebody who is really, really extreme on the left has said something in the public square and gotten fired over it. But if you're coming from the conservative side, there's an immediate danger that just about anything you say could result in a firing. And not only that, but blackballed and not being able to get a job in the industry that you're in, period. So there's a lot of chance that's being taken by just me talking about politics on my channel. And I recognize that, and I'm willing to take that on because I think it's really important for us to have a genuine conversation about these things. And I do obviously tend to lean more to the conservative side, a little bit more to the right than I am left, but I am not. Like, I completely disavow the alt-right. They're horrible people. I mean, we shouldn't have it. I'm in the same vein as like the Jordan Petersons, the Dave Rubins, the Tim Pools. Like, we just want liberty, we want freedom, we want. I don't mind diversity. I just don't like it being one of those. What do you call them? Like not a dog whistle. I don't think that we need to force it. I think we should just accept it, right? We need to be. I believe that the center position, and it's always been the center position, is you can have a diversity of ideas, and you can have a diversity of people. You have a diversity of skin color, religion. Like we like the diversity because it helps to refine the direction of the community, right? It helps to kind of bash those really out there, outlandish ideas against kind of the tidal wave of reality. And if you don't have those differing opinions and different voices, you can't refine them. They start to grow in the dark. And that's a big, scary thing. And right now, we've been living, I think, for probably about the last 20 years or so, probably 30 years, opinions on politics have become so toxic because people are not expressing them until it gets to that extreme. And so you end up not really having a sphere of how can I'm struggling to find the words to explain this, but I think you just got to have that anvil that you beat that sword against to try to figure out exactly and refine and shape that blade. How do you understand what it is that you're actually wanting to say, right? How do you refine what you're wanting to say? How do you refine your ideas if you don't have that blood instrument to bang against? You need that, because if you don't fully grasp your ideas. You don't fully grasp your concepts. And we need that. Like, that's how civilizations grow. That is, we refine the ideas over and over again. We put them through this process. And so long as we continuously devolve from that political, sphere, and we stop talking about things, we're not going to come up with new ideas. We're not going to shape new ideas. So this is why it's important to talk about it, because if you don't, it's just going to languish. We're not going to advance in any way. In fact, we're going to digress, right? We're going to become much more polarized, because people are going to start to feel certain ways in private, and then it only when, because it is private and it grows private, it becomes more emotional. You start to grow a bit of more of an emotional bond when it's not being publicly announced all the time. Like, if you think about anything that you do, if you are doing it, if you do it regularly, often, out in the open, at first it's very intimidating, right? And that's like what I'm doing here, right? Doing videos and stuff. It's very intimidating at first, but you start to get a little bit more and more comfortable, and you get more and more comfortable with the negative feedback, right? The counter back, the people saying, I don't agree with you. You get more and more comfortable with that because you get it regularly. You learn how to handle it. You learn how to deal with it. But when you don't do that, when you don't express those things, and you just kind of let it languish in your own home and in private, and you don't talk about it, then all of a sudden, when that idea is attacked in the public sphere, you're either going to do one of two things. You're either going to continue to kind of, I say this word, you kind of cower a little bit, right? Or you get really, really mad. You get really angry because you're like, if this is a core concept of your being, you're going to fight back with everything you've got. And that is when you start to drive those conflicts that will wedge a gap between people. And more I find that, at least the people that I know of that are on the more conservative side, there's like a bubble a little bit on Facebook. There's a little bit of some communication that can be done. But, we're kind of like all friends, right? We all kind of like share the same things. We all talk, and that's dangerous. We shouldn't be doing that, because that's kind of what happens. That's kind of how I saw that the left kind of built up, is they've got these bubbles. They've got these spheres of influence that don't really grow outside of their area, right? Like, that's how you get the media of New York, like the left coast and the left and right coastal regions are very biased leftist, right? You get that because it's just kind of like, that's your sphere. That's all you talk about. That's all the people that you can bang those ideas against. And so when somebody comes into that bubble and has a different opinion, they can get very, very intimidated, and they don't want to talk about it. And those communities that have grown this bubble, like, get really, really reactive to any sort of outside influence, because they've just kind of grown. So when you do this kind of thing and you want to approach it in a more mild-mannered way, you have to be very, very careful. You still have to hold on to your core values and your core ideas, but you have to be really careful and crafted about how you do it. And unfortunately, in today's world, it's even worse. That's awesome, Andy. So Andy posted, I'm on the left, but listen to Fox News so I don't stay in an echo chamber. Yeah, and in Fox News, like, they're okay. They definitely have a conservative slant, right? They're more geared towards Republicans. but at least it gives you a differing opinion to kind of like think about and mull over and try to, yeah, there's some ring of truth to that, but it really kind of goes against this core value. There's a lot of really taboo subjects too, that like abortion, right? That's a real big one because that's a real cut and dry, right? You're either for it or against it. Well, there's a couple of areas where maybe there's some middle ground in there, but nobody even wants to give an inch one way or the other, because by giving an inch, that means, oh, I've allowed the other side to even have a voice in this discussion. And that's silly. Like that's really silly. Anyway, so thank you for joining, Andy. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad you're on board along with Marcus. And I'm sure Kent's out there somewhere. Kent's usually roaming around. But I did not actually plan on talking politics today. That was not actually what I was going to do. But I am really glad you guys are here with me. I wanted to talk about this real quickly. A developer created a two-way chat using only CSS and HTML. That is pretty darn amazing. And they did it with, so I don't know if you guys are too familiar with HTML and CSS. It's something that I'm just barely touching on my Programming Made Easy channel. So I don't know that too many of you guys are really, really proficient with HTML and CSS or understand its inner workings. But the primary concept here is HTML is like the skeleton of a web page, right? It defines what the different objects are on the page that you're going to see. And like everything on the page. So, here we have this picture of this girl with, holding her mouth there. That's basically an image element, right? And then we have other image elements and other image elements there. But everything that you see on here is some sort of element. We've got like this little calendar icons, like all these icons, all the text is an element, or I should say what the text is inside of is an element. But it's basically lots and lots of elements. And each one of these elements are basically like objects, right? They're things, they're nouns, if you will. And then you have CSS, which defines what kind of colors are going to appear. How big is it going to show up? Do I want to change the font color? Do I want to change? You can even do things like make things on a grid. So rather than doing tables, like using a table element, you can actually kind of specify with CSS that this thing is going to be so and so wide. So like we see over here, we have this big wide gap between the text here and this side of the page over here. This is all CSS doing this. That's figuring out that we've got elements over here, and then we got separate elements over here, and there's like this clear dividing line going vertically here. This is all CSS that determines the layout of the page, the color of the page, etc. Now, traditionally, if you wanted to do any sort of interactivity with the page, that's JavaScript. It's all JavaScript, all right? Except now we're starting to get into WebAssembly, but that's a whole other thing. But JavaScript is the core language of what makes things clickable and usable and draggable and all that good stuff. So, the fact that somebody was able to write a CSS and HTML only chat with no JavaScript is kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing. So let's see if we got. So he clicks on each button and then clicks on submit. So these are two different, right? These are two different pages. Or I should say, these are two different browsers opening the same page. Can click on a button and then click on submit. That's pretty amazing. It's not obviously all that efficient. It's not like a great chat system, but the technological marvel of doing it. Bidirectional CSS only async chat. So it turns out the CSS background images don't get loaded until the relevant selector is triggered. So he uses like pseudo classes to do this. And I'm not going to dig into the whole details of it because we don't really have time to do that here. But there is an inner working, so I'll make sure that there's a link here, and you can go read more of the details if you want. But that's pretty crazy, being able to do that. Okay, this was a huge, this was a jarring article to me. This really just blew me away when I read this because I don't hate Java. I really don't. It's not a terrible language. In fact, it's very, very, very similar to C#. They're like twinsies. So I'm not against Java in any way, shape, or form. I just prefer C#. I think there's some things that it has. And as I've been watching the arc of the different programming languages, I've had this gnawing feeling that Java is getting... It's not about being old and stale or anything like that. It's about just kind of not... It's still growing in popularity to an extent. It's still used a lot. But people are just not really fond of it. It's not like the language that's just, oh, this feels great. And I have that warm, fuzzy feeling about C#, so I don't know. But yeah, Google has officially started to favor Kotlin over Java. It says half of Android devs use it. Now, in my opinion, one of the reasons why Java is still as dominant as it is because of Android, because of the use of Android. So having Google basically say, we're going to prefer Kotlin over Java is a huge, huge deal. What other sphere are you going to do Java development for? You can't do Java so you don't run Java in the browser anymore, right? That's gone. Ever since we went to HTML5, you don't run Java in the browser anymore. It's not, because it's a plugin, right? You have to have it as a plugin for your browsers, and the browsers have basically said, we don't want plugins anymore. We don't want you to have to install a plugin to run a website. So Java went away, Adobe Flash went away, like all these other technologies, Silverlight went away, right? All those things that were kind of standard web technologies have been thrown out, and Java was one of them. Okay, running Java on the browser was kind of a big deal. There were a lot of sites. There still are a lot of sites that use just Java. You have to use like an old Internet Explorer browser in order to run those pages, because it's like the only thing that'll still do Java. You can still do plugins for. So once Java no longer had any sort of ability to run a website, and yet web is becoming more and more the standard for a lot of companies' programs, right? A lot of companies offer only web applications. So, there's not as many desktop apps. There's some phone apps, obviously. There's a lot of phone apps, I should say. But when it comes to enterprise applications, enterprise is not focused on mobile. It's focused on web. Okay, that's where a lot of the enterprise world is. So if Java is not a web technology that you can use for web pages, but you can use it as a back-end development, right? That's kind of where we still have a good stronghold for Java. But one of the other strongholds for Java was Android. Like, it was one of the only, it was kind of three legs, right? Java had web that you could use through the plugin. You could do, you can still do like web, you still do Java as a web application using like Java server pages or Timeleaf or something like that, right? You can have a back-end application that runs and has a template engine that will interpret HTML and display it. But that's all server-side, right? That's all server-side Java. It's not client-side Java. So there was the back-end Java, like your typical Java development. You could do web deployments. You could do Java applications. They had desktop applications too. And then they also had Android. So it was kind of like those were the legs that Java was standing on, and it had a lot of popularity because of its cross-platform ability. You could write your code in over here and deploy it over there, and it just worked. And there was a lot of greatness about that. But now Android is one of the legs that's being taken out. The Java web client is basically gone because you can't do the plugin anymore. So now the only thing that Java has to stand on are desktop applications, which, again, that's not really where the market is anymore. So desktop is like going the way of the dodo bird. And not only that, but you can write like JavaScript applications that run as if they are desktop applications. So that's kind of like, why would you do Java apps anymore? And so the only thing that's left now is enterprise, the back-end enterprise stuff. That's really the only thing that's left for Java that's like where they can continue to focus. And I'm not seeing a ton of advancement. There is some advancement, but they've been releasing new versions of Java. So they're up to Java 12 now. And yet for enterprise, it's still only Java 8, right? Java 1.8. So they really haven't progressed the enterprise side very much. It's not really moving in the way that you would expect it to. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great things about Java. I love the Spring framework. I love Spring Boot and the ability to have like dependency injection just using annotations and this is really some good core stuff. And Java's been around for a long time, so it's been really fleshed out pretty well. But now that Android is no longer targeting Java, I wouldn't say they're getting rid of it because obviously, so Kotlin is actually running on the JVM, okay, on the Java virtual machine. So the JVM is basically the runtime environment. If you were to compare it to C#, C#.NET, the .NET framework has the common language runtime, right? The common language runtime, the CLR for .NET, is essentially the JVM for Java. It's this interpreter of the language that runs on the computer itself, right? In interfaces with the operating system and hardware. So, Kotlin is basically saying we can target. So imagine if some other company, like let's say in this case JetBrains, because Kotlin developed JetBrains, or JetBrains developed Kotlin. So imagine if JetBrains came out with another language that targeted the .NET CLR, but wasn't C#, wasn't VB.NET, wasn't F#. It was its own language, but it could run on the .NET runtime. Okay? If you imagine that, and understand the CLR is open source, so it's there. Okay, like you could develop your own language to run on here. You just have to make sure it compiles to something that it can interpret. So that's essentially what's happening on the Java side. Is Kotlin is this language that is running on the JVM that's not Java. Okay, it compiles to the bytecode that runs in the Java JVM. So this is like a usurper. All right, Kotlin is kind of like this usurper of Java. And now Google is announcing we're going Kotlin. Like, we still have Java. It's still going to support it, but it's legacy. Java is going to be legacy. It's going to be favoring Kotlin. And just a few things that I highlighted here. Google says Android app development will increasingly become Kotlin first. So new things, new features are going to be Kotlin first. You have to wait for the Java version of it. And whenever a company does that, that's kind of the direction that's how, if you think about VB.NET versus C# and how that kind of transpired, is kind of the same thing. It's like we favor C#, more things are going to come out C#, therefore more developers become C# developers than VB.NET developers. That's what's going to happen here. Like, it's going to start to influence the developer base to start being Kotlin first. But the developer base was already kind of Kotlin heavy. The developers, if you ask them if they've done Kotlin and they've done Java, they will tell you they prefer Kotlin. Okay, they will. So there's already kind of this influence by the developer community to go Kotlin. They've wanted to, and now Google and Android are basically fulfilling that. And they're making it so that Kotlin first features will be coming out for Android. So Google's Chet Hayes says, if you're starting a new project, you should write it in Kotlin. Android development will become increasingly Kotlin first. Kotlin jobs are spiking hard of late, suggesting companies are also turning away from Java when it comes to Android-related app building. Android Jetpack APIs will be offered in Kotlin first, which is a move by Google in its drive to dismiss Java. So Google was actually sued by Oracle over this. Was it Oracle? I don't remember exactly who, but I think it was Oracle. They were sued over some of the packages, some of the parts of the framework that they were using. And from what I understand, and I haven't gotten into the details or the nitty-gritty of all this, but from what I understand, some of the areas are not open source, and Google was using them, and so they got sued over it. But I tell you what, if you're going to have a lawsuit with one of the largest, basically, consumers of your product, and you're going to sue them, or of your language, I think that's a pretty big miscalculation on their part. And now Google's basically gonna make them pay for that by moving into Kotlin. And that's big, all right? That's really, really big, because now what is that market share going to be for Java? I'm not saying that this is the final bell that's tolling for Java, not in any way. There's a ton of jobs out there for Java. There is a ton of work. I can't even get into the details of this, but let me just tell you that I know that in the industry, Java is huge. It's absolutely huge. And our company is trying to do some things in order to help facilitate that over at Wazoo. So then also on here, what do we got? So Google's move to Kotlin is a bit like Apple's shift to Swift, except Apple never fully divested itself from Objective-C or loudly claimed it was moving support away from its legacy language. Apple also never faced $1 billion lawsuit over programming language, as Google has with Java. Yeah, that tends to kind of sour you a little bit from it, doesn't it? When you get multi-billion-dollar lawsuits over your use of a language. So I can kind of understand their position. I can kind of understand why Google would be doing this. And it just means that was a really bad move on the part of Oracle, because really, moving people to another language off of your product, maybe there could have been something else negotiated. Maybe you didn't have to sue over that. Maybe you could have just hey, you guys can we come up with a compromise? Can you at least put a note in there this package provided by Oracle? Couldn't you do something like that? Because this is going to be turning a lot of people away from it. And I think that's unfortunate, but man, I've been seeing Java grow smaller in favorability. There's still a lot of holdouts in there. There's still a lot of people that'll argue against. I was reading a thread on someone else's YouTube channel who said C# is better than Java. He did a video on it very politely too, not a harsh, a harsh bashing of Java in any way, shape, or form, very softly. But man, there was a discussion that started to spark there, and you could see the people who are Java heavy start, well, Java's great for this and this and this, and then some of their arguments were about especially this is the old trope that you always hear is C# and .NET is for Windows only. Man, you haven't done C# development in a while, have you? Because if that's what you think now, you haven't been paying attention for about the last 4 years. There's a major shift. And now, of course, like I was talking about yesterday with the .NET 5 announcement, there's a shift to basically cross-plat everything. You can target any platform you want, use the same code base. You can deploy an application for Android as you can for Windows, as you can for Linux, as you can for Mac, as you can for iOS, as you can for WebAssembly. Like they're kind of like making it a big deal in the Microsoft world that we're going to try to bring all of these technologies under one roof. And that's not exactly something that you're going to get too many other places. I don't know too many other frameworks that are going in that direction. All right. Any questions from anybody? I'll give you guys a little bit because we've got a little bit of a stream delay here. But if you guys have any final questions before I shut down the stream, and thanks to all 7 of you watching right now, I appreciate it. You guys struggled through and strove through the political discussion that we just had and managed to survive to the technological questions. So thank you very much for that. Any questions? You know what? I'm just going to play music until I get something here. It's a little loud. Let me turn that down. Oh, this is like game music right here. Action movie. Come on, all 7 of you. I know you're out there. You got questions. I've got answers. Actually, the answer is always 42, but what do you guys think of a game stream? I've been thinking about that. I've been kind of going back and forth on it, doing some gaming. I got a lot of like streamed content on this channel, right? Like I talk about everything. But yeah, I'm thinking about like doing some gaming. I'm by the way, I go under the name Really Awful Gamer. Really Awful Gamer. Because I'm really terrible at it. Like, that's the thing. I'm going to be really bad. So if we do a live stream of me playing video games, it's going to be bad. But I like the music. No questions? Gosh, come on, people. I can't have a live Q&A session if I'm not getting any questions. That's just how it works. I'm just going to sit here and do the Night at the Roxbury thing while you guys think about it. You guys don't think I'll do it, will you? Oh, hey, we got a question. Marcus, thank you. What is your preference, Git versus TFVC? Team Foundations, huh? Oh, boy. No problem, SA. So, Marcus, what is your preference, Git over Git versus TFVC? Git, far and away. Git. Yeah, Git with its... Git just makes more sense, right? Let me see if I can find a little comparison chart. So just, yeah, I was gonna say, so what you're really talking about is, it's not TFVC. TFVC is like, so it's version control, right, for Team Foundations. There is Subversion, that's what it's called. So SVC, right? That's what it really is. And SVC is like, you have to directly be, like, in order to do your pushes and stuff, you have to be connected all the time. Like, you can't, they say Git versus Team Foundation server. So even even Microsoft is really embracing Git, right? They just bought GitHub, for crying out loud. They're embracing Git. I think they're going to make it the de facto standard. Git is already pretty much the de facto standard. Yeah, so this is, I'm just trying to find if we can find a good, like, comparison chart here to show you guys. SVC, let me see if I can find an image, maybe. SVC versus Git. That's Myth versus fact. I'm sorry, guys. Nothing beats like just watching me. Images. SVN. I said SVC, didn't I? That would be why. All right. This looks like a good chart. Let's see. Bring this over here. And share. Boom. There we go. So with SVN, this is a good graph. This is a good image to kind of illustrate the differences between the two. So this isn't like wholly big. Like this isn't like the whole big picture of the differences. But when it comes to SVN, like you're basically all working from a copy of this centrally located repository, right? You've got this one code base and you're all just kind of making exchanges with that central one. And this means that there's some problems in storing your versions if you're not connected to that central repository. Okay, that's kind of one of the big deals. Let me turn down the music a little bit. I think you guys can hear that in the background. So, here, let me just do this. I'm getting distracted here. So the SVN, like it's okay. It was great for its time. It was kind of the predecessor to Git, and SVN, again, you have to have this like direct connection with the repo in order to work with it and to save changes to it. Git has a completely different way of going about it. So you have a central repository and then you have a local repository, and then you kind of make this exchange between it. So like how we have this direct connection between the working copy and the SVN that you're working on, it's not a direct link for your Git, right? Your Git repository is locally stored, and then you just basically do pushes and pulls to that master repository. And that way you can have your own version that you make a bunch of changes to. And if you're disconnected from that central repository, like if you're disconnected from the internet for a month, you can still store your changes locally in different versions. You can work on different branches. You can work on different versions of the program on your local system, being completely separate from that central repository. In fact, you don't even need to have a central repository for Git. You can just do source control on your local system and never even have that central repository. The only reason you need a central repository is if you're going to work with someone else, or if you're going to publish your source code to someone or to somewhere. That's really the only reason why you have a central repository, is if you're going to work with someone else. But if you're working on your own, then Git can be stored on your own. You can have different versions, different branches, different things going on with your own application that you can easily swap back and forth between. And then there's like the recursive history. Like you can go back, way back in Git and recover just about everything. If you ever made a commit that committed a file, it's there forever unless you completely delete it. Like you have to explicitly delete that thing in order to get rid of it. And then I'm not talking about deleting a file. You have to go to find the commits that contain that file and go delete those commits. That's like, it's just better to just say, if you're going to delete a file, delete the file, do another commit. Okay. Because it's almost like it's one directional with Git, right? It's just one direction. And it remembers everything in the history. So you can always go back to a certain point in time and say, oh, there was that file I accidentally deleted. You can go back to an earlier version of your code base, pull that file, and then paste it basically back into your application at a later point in time. Like that's kind of the backup recovery system of Git, which is fantastic. SVN has really not done anything. Like Subversion is not really made any strides. I don't even think Subversion. Have they even done anything recently? I don't think they have. And they're just gonna do Subversion. Yeah, like this is old, right? We don't really do Subversion anymore. Git is kind of the de facto standard in the community now. We're using TFS with TFVS in our company because the most C# developers don't like Git. They should like Git. Like, Git is amazing. You just have to understand it. And I think that's probably the biggest problem is Git takes a moment to really fully understand and grasp. It's one of the harder technologies to really think about all the way. I've done talks about this, not on my YouTube channel, but let me see if I can find, I have a image that I absolutely love using. And then I'm going to wrap it up with this too, because we do got to get going to work here. I got to find it though. Where did I put it? CFS. I think it would be in here. This is just an image I grabbed from online, but it really, yeah. I can't use it because it's a Wazoo proprietary thing. I can use the image, but I can't use like the slide that I have for it. So let me just make another one here real quick. Ooh, no, that's not what I want to do. Give me a second. On the fly. Sorry. Dead air. I hate dead air. Slideshow from current slide. There we go. Now I can share it. All right, so this is an image that I pulled from online somewhere. I don't remember exactly where. It's a long time ago. But I think this really helps to nail down like all the different interactions that goes on with Git. And you can see it looks complicated, right? It looks complicated. And that is very intimidating to a lot of people. Like, I just want to be able to make some changes, click a button, and save it. And you can actually do that with Visual Studio. And Visual Studio Code has a really good Git integration with it as well. But you still should understand the underpinnings of how Git works. And a lot of developers that are kind of more legacy developers don't feel comfortable with this complexity. But the complexity is what makes it so beautiful. Okay? So let's say, so here I am, this dork with glasses, right? So this is clearly Steve. He's got orange hair. So I make some change on my computer, right? And I go and I update it. And then so this update is like, or actually, sorry, that's the other way around. Sorry. So I make some changes on my computer, and then what I do is I commit. Okay. Oh, I can do this. So I do a laser pointer. So there we go. So I can make changes on my computer and then commit it. And that goes into this thing called a local repository. Okay. This is it's like a database, if you will, of my changes. And it's storing my changes over time. Every single change that I've made over time that I do a commit. Every time you do a commit, it's like store an image of my system at this point. Store an image of my file structure at this point in time and find all the changes that have happened since the last time, right? So it's what we call a differential, right? What are the differences from the last time I saved? Find all those differences, and in this commit, save those changes. Now, I can go back and forth between those commits. So I can go back to another commit, like, oh, I didn't mean to make that change. Let me go back. I want to go back to that point in time and like start off from there and delete everything that I just did. You can do that. You can go back all the way in history. You can go all the way back to the very, very start of your application and start from there all over again if you want, but still maintain the thread of all the stuff that you have done. So it's like this ability to fork off at any time. And all of that information is being stored inside of this repository. This local repository. I haven't even talked about the central repository. This is just the ability to store your changes over time to your own local system and have that backup and recovery. Like, think of how amazing that is. To be able to make a change, remember and store that and always have it forever. Like unless you delete it, unless you explicitly go in and delete not the file, but delete the commit and delete the branch that commit was on. Like that's what you have to do. You have to be very, very explicit in order to delete something permanently from the record. Otherwise, you can delete a file and it's not a big deal. Like how many times have you lost a file and been like, oh my God, where am I going to find it? I have no idea. It's gone now. It's gone forever. All that work that you just did for the last 24, 48, 72 hours, gone. Well, with Git, that doesn't happen because you can always go back to the last commit. Anyway, local repository is this local database, if you will. But there's a repository just like it that exists out on some sort of central repository. And the central repository is basically GitHub. If you think of this as GitHub, okay? It doesn't have to be GitHub. It could be Bitbucket. You can run your own central repository on a server somewhere. Like if you just want to hold it internally within your company, you can do that too. Just as long as it's a Git repository. Okay? And what you do is you push those changes. You basically do a differential check. You check to see, here's my local repository in this state. Go compare that against the central repository, and any changes, go push those changes up to that central repository. So all those commits that I've did to my local repository, push them to the central repository for everyone else to see. And then if Jane over here needs to pull that, if Jane needs those changes that I just pushed, right? So I'm taking my local repository, I'm pushing them to the central repository. Then Jane over here, she's going to pull. She's going to do a pull. She's going to find out what's on that central repository and pull them down to her local repository. So she's getting my changes. And then she can then update her code base based upon those changes. Okay, so there's a flow to it, right? There's an organization, and that's just half of it. We haven't even talked about branching yet. But just this flow of how do you commit your changes, push those changes, pull those changes, and then update your code base. That is a process that a lot of developers don't feel comfortable understanding. And I can kind of understand why. It's not that complicated, though. Once you understand it, once you get it, it's like, well, why would anybody not want to do this? Right? Once you understand it, why wouldn't you do it? Because SVN doesn't have this kind of thing. It's just, imagine getting rid of local repository and you can only commit to this central repository. That's basically the difference between SVN and Git. Is just there is no local repository. You push and pull everything to this central repo. Which means if you're gone on a long hiatus for something, like say you go on, I don't know, like you've got a road trip that you got to do. You're going to be offline for a week. But you still want to be able to do some work. You still want to look at your code base. You still got some things you want to do. You don't have to have that connection to the central repository like you do with SVN. Okay? So why wouldn't you? And branches allow us to, like anytime that we do a commit, you can make a branch off of it. So like I want a completely different version of this application that I'm going to work on for a while. Like let this thing go on. So Jane's working on this one branch, which we don't really see on here. And I really can't take that other image that I would pull because that one I made for WASU myself. But essentially you can think of this, if you've got like a master branch that's going linear like this, and then you have a branch that can come off and then be rejoined. So you can work on something away from the master branch. You can like have this one branch over here. You kind of pull off from it for a while. You work on it for a little bit, and then you can merge those changes back in whenever you want. That way, other people who are working on that master branch or doing their own branches that are being merged into the master branch, your changes are not affecting that master branch until you want them to. Okay? Like how awesome is that? I want to be making all these changes, but don't actually implement them until I say so. That's what you can do with Git. All right? So, yeah, Git is awesome. I don't know why anybody wouldn't do it. Yeah, I love Git. Okay, guys, that's going to have to wrap it up for me. I'm already pretty long here. I got to get to work. You guys got to get to work. But don't forget to drink your coffee, because without that coffee, how are you going to code? How are you going to code if you don't drink coffee? right? In goes the coffee, and out comes the code. All right, well, thanks for joining me today, guys. I really appreciate it. Again, this is something we do every weekday. We start up at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. We do, for 4 out of the 5 days of the week, I come up with a topic and I discuss it. But on the 5th day, on Fridays, it's all about you guys. What do you want to talk about? So thanks so much for joining me today on today's Q&A. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye-bye.